How many of you, in the course of your life, have made sacrifices? Sacrifices as a mother, a father, a daughter, a son, sacrifice at work, sacrifice. How many of you, have any of you made any sacrifices in life? Raise your hand.
All the time.
Raise your hand. Yeah, we all make sacrifices, right? We all do something for a greater purpose. I mean, how many of you mothers get up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, if not now, when you have your babies, to take care of the baby, right? That's a sacrifice, isn't it? How many of you at work, maybe your boss is not so nice to you, but you continue doing what you're supposed to be doing. You make that sacrifice. The point I'm making is life is full of sacrifices. And that's because sacrifice is natural to the soul. When you're in a loving relationship, right? You make sacrifices for your beloved, don't you? You may not want to do anything, or you may not want to do something that you have to do to please them, but you do it. You do it anyway. Sacrifice is natural for the soul. The soul always makes sacrifice because the soul's eternal position is to be the servant of Krishna. And in that position, to maintain that position, we have to make sacrifices. So whether on a material level or on a spiritual level, there's sacrifice that is necessary to progress in your life. If you want to progress in your life, you will endure. You will do sacrifices for the higher good, for the greater good. Mother, for instance, for the sake of the children, right? You will do sacrifice for the sake of the children. So there's always something. Sacrifice usually indicates that there is an understanding that it's not all about me. When it's all about me, it's called narcissism. Narcissism means I am the center of the universe and everything revolves around my desires, right? That's a psychological condition called narcissism, extreme self-centeredness. It's not about my kids, it's about me. It's not about anything, it's all about me and my comfort and what pleases me and what doesn't please me. So sacrifice means you do something for the greater good. Thank you so much. Thank you. Hare Krishna. So spiritually, Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, how many of you have read the Bhagavad Gita? Raise your hand.
In process.
In the process. Okay. Reading or have read Bhagavad Gita. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks in the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, he talks about there are 2 basic types of sacrifice that we make. The first one is Jagnarta. Jagna means sacrifice. Jagnarta kamano nyatra. Karmano nyatra. So sacrifice that you perform to please God, to please Krishna. And the end result of that sacrifice is you get free from suffering condition of life. Suffering. Suffering usually is in the mind. Pain, if you don't have pain, you're not alive. So pain is there, but what you do with it, you can perpetuate it and suffer and suffer and suffer. Some people make a living out of suffering. They call it the victim. Oh, woe is me, I'm suffering so much, I have to do this and do that. So Krishna says there's two types of sacrifice. Sacrifice that you make on behalf of God. And then loko yam karma bandhana. Sacrifice that keeps you bound to this world, birth after birth. Because according to the Bhagavad Gita, we are eternal souls. That means no beginning, no end. Who accepts that? Either hypothetically or intellectually, who can accept that we're eternal beings? Anyone? Okay. Everyone else doesn't accept it or has doubt? No, you accept? Okay. Who accepts that we're eternal beings? Okay. For those of you who don't definitively accept it, who will accept the possibility that we're eternal beings? The possibilities. So if we accept the possibility that we're eternal beings, that means no beginning, no end. So that'll mean if we are beings, souls that have existence prior to this body, that means that we've performed action before, we perform action now. What happened?
It was unsacrificed.
Oh, you don't have to do that. You're a beautiful model.
It was just glare coming out.
Oh, I see. So we'll accept sacrifice two ways. Either you do it for God or you don't. Do it for God, you get purified, you can get liberated from birth after birth after birth after birth. Karma. Everybody heard of karma? Do you know what karma is? Have you heard of karma before? Yeah? It's action and reaction. Everything that you do, here's a reaction. So going birth after birth means you're performing action, either good action or bad action. If you perform good action, then you get good results. If you perform bad action, you get bad results. But Krishna says there's a third type of action called akarma. Every time in Sanskrit, a is in front of a word, it means not or without. So akarma means action that doesn't have any reaction. And that's what bhakti yoga is all about. The yoga that we perform, the yoga of love and devotion. It is actually structuring your life in such a way that you are performing action that's dedicated to God. And the result is, there is no result. There is no reaction. There is no material result. There's no material reaction. That akarma, action offered to God, not only is there no reaction to it, but it also helps to cleanse the heart of previous reactions. So it wears down the reactive that we have to go through in terms of our suffering or our enjoyment. On the material level, our suffering and our enjoyment is based on our karmic reactions. And someone who comes to the level of understanding, at least hypothetically, that I'm a soul, and at least hypothetically, that the soul, in its natural position as servant of God, can become free from all suffering. Would anyone like that? Would you like to become free from suffering?
I'm first in line.
Huh?
Everybody.
Yeah. Anyone here not want to be free from suffering? No one?
I don't think so.
Okay. So sacrifice means that you structure your life in such a way that everything becomes an offering to God, and therefore a sacrifice for God, to please God. For instance, in bhakti, does everyone here eat? Right? You eat. So you can eat according to karma and get reaction. And depending on how you eat is what kind of reaction you'll get. In other words, if you eat satvically, like a vegetarian diet, then the reaction will be more sattvic or more goodness. If you eat rajasically, where you cause distress to your body and the body of other animals, then they'll get more distress. If you eat tamasically, according to ignorance, then you don't really care what you eat. And you don't really care what kind of reaction you get from what you eat. Whether it's a physical reaction, like some people eat processed foods, canned, frozen, old, stale. So from a tamasic perspective or ignorant perspective, you can't see things as they are. You can't see that if I put this in my body, it's not good for me. There's some people on the level that they can continue to eat things that are actually not good for them, not healthy for them, and may cause further harm to their body, destruction to their body. There was this one man, I forget what his name was, Jared something. He just ate McDonald's for 30 days. He did an experiment for 30 days and he gained something like 150 pounds in 30 days. Can you imagine? So he wanted to do this as an experiment to show people the result of eating McDonald's. You may not do only a McDonald's diet, but the result of eating it, it has detrimental effects to the body, to the heart, to the blood, the
Blood work.
huh?
Blood work.
Blood work, but the plaque, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The plaque within the vessels, all of that. So 3 types of eating: goodness, and you get good reaction to that. Rajasic, passion, and you get distress from that. Ignorance, and you just destruction to yourself. But there's another level of eating, and that's gratitude. Eating in gratitude, which means we always see that whatever we have to eat, we're grateful. We didn't produce the earth where the seeds go. We didn't produce seeds. We didn't produce the light of the sun, and the light of the moon, which nourishes food. We didn't produce the water that comes raining down indiscriminately. We didn't produce that. That's all provided for us. So the person who can recognize that and recognize it all comes from God, that person in gratitude makes a sacrifice. And that sacrifice is, before I eat it, before I smell it, I offer it to God. And that's a sacrifice. And what's the result of that sacrifice? You please God. And what's the result of pleasing? What's the result of pleasing someone else? Let's talk to the wives here. You please your husband. What's the result?
Please you.
Huh?
Wants to please you.
Yeah, there's reciprocation, right? That's what love is all about. Love is all about reciprocation. In a healthy relationship, if one serves the other, the other one naturally is inclined to serve back. That's called reciprocation. That's the test of love. The test of love is, I want to serve that person who is serving me so nicely. I want to sacrifice in that way, in that regard. So sacrifice is of the utmost importance, and it's really easy to do. It's just reconfiguring your perspective of the world. And that means it's a perspective of gratitude. I am grateful for the food. I am grateful for the shelter. I am grateful for my family. I am grateful for the ability to see things in such a way that I'm grateful, that I have gratitude. I'm grateful for that. Because some people aren't grateful for anything. All they do is complain, right? Just complain, 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 and blame, and blame, and blame. So just to be able to have a perspective of life where you can be grateful, that's a blessing. That means you've been blessed with a certain vision, which is beyond self-centeredness. Now, talking a little bit about sacrifice is being intrinsic to the human being. God gives us an opportunity in any age. That means, according to the Vedas, according to Bhagavad Gita, there are 4 seasons in time. We have 4 seasons, right? Winter, spring, summer, and fall. We have 4 seasons. The time periods in this universe is also broken down into 4 seasons. Satya, that's many, 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 many hundreds of thousands of years ago. And at that time, 100% of the people were God conscious. 100%. And in order to please God, they did meditation on his name. They did meditation. Then as time, everything due to time wears down, right? You buy a brand new car. It's nice and shiny and clean. It has that new car smell, right? And you love it. And then 2-3 years later, got some scratches on it, some dents. Maybe someone spilled something in the back. You got a stain on the... So now your new car, due to the influence of time, gets a little worn looking. And then you think, boy, I wish I had a new car. But you already had a new car. But time degenerates everything. Time breaks down everything. So even in universal time, you have this beautiful period called Satya Yuga, then a little wearing down due to the influence of time on consciousness of humanity. Now only 75% of the population is God conscious. And the way to perform sacrifice is by doing fire sacrifice with mantras. You've probably seen it if you've ever been to a wedding or some other kind of religious function. You see the Brahmins there sitting in front of the fire, chanting mantras, pouring ghee on you. So Treta Yuga, that was way to please God, to sacrifice, and your sacrifice would be pleasing to God. Dwapara Yuga is when you worship the deities. We have deities of Krishna, deities of Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra. And that time period, the way to please God was to do deity worship, to offer God the elements of earth, water, fire, air, through ether. And then we're in the age now. This is the winter season of universal time. And what is this season called? Kali Yuga. Yes. And in Kali Yuga, hardly anyone is God conscious. Dwapara Yuga, half the population. Kali Yuga, hardly anyone anymore is God conscious. And it's not getting better, right? You can just see, right, from when you were young to now, Isn't there a difference in world mood? I mean, I was born in 1950. So I went through the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and all the way up to now. And my parents used to say this all the time. It ain't like when I was a child. And now I'm saying, boy, it isn't like when I was a child. I used to ride my bicycle anywhere or walk anywhere, not feel at danger at all. Would you let your child do that? Those of you who live in Miami, would you let your child ride a bike to go to school? No. You wouldn't feel safe for them. You wouldn't feel concerned. You would feel concerned for their safety. So Kali Yuga is a time period where the time factor has degenerated, worn down consciousness. So we can't effectively do meditation like they did in Satyayuga. We don't effectively, when you see fire sacrifices, Srila Prabhupada said that's just a show in Kali Yuga. It doesn't really have the effect, the potency. Deity worship, very difficult to do deity worship. Even in our own temples, there are many deficiencies in our deity worship because of consciousness. So Kali Yuga, God doesn't abandon us because we're in this yuga. In fact, he's much kinder to us in that he gives us a sacrifice that anyone can perform. Child, when my son was, how old was he? 10 months? Playing kartals in kirtan?
Half 11.
Yeah, he was 10, 11 months, and he was playing kartals in kirtan. Somewhere I have a video of it. I'm not just a proud papa, although I am, but he actually did that. And we have a little video of him playing kartals in time at 10 months old. So the process of sacrifice to please God in this age is called Sankirtan or Kirtan. Krishna Varnam Tvisha Krishna Sango Pagastra Parshanam Jagnai Sankirtana Praya Yajanti Hi Sumedasaha. So Krishna Varnam Tvisha Krishna, that means Krishna comes to us, but not as Krishna. He comes to us as Lord Chaitanya. That manifestation of Krishna that shows us how to perform sacrifice to please God. Sango Pagasta Parshadam. And he comes to this planet bringing all of his associates, his abode, his place where he lives. He brings it to this planet. You have Vrindavan, you have Mayapur, the place where Krishna played, the place where Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu played. Jagnai Sankirtana Prayer. And the yajna, the sacrifice that he performed to please God is Kirtan, Sankirtan, the chanting of the holy names. Yajantihi Su Medasaha. Su means good. Medasaha means good intelligence. So a person who is objective and looks at things objectively can understand that principle, the principle of selflessness and selfless service to God, to do that which pleases God rather than self-centeredness, only that which pleases myself. So, Jagnai Sankirtana Prayer Yajanti Hi Sumedasaha. So in this age of Kali, what needs to be performed in order to please God is just to chant his names. We have japa, the meditation that we do. We have kirtan. Sankirtan means complete. It means complete glorification of the Supreme. And that person or who has good intelligence, objective intelligence, can look at things objectively, can realize that this is what I should be doing, chanting God's names. And it doesn't matter. You can be Christian, you can be Jewish, you can be Islam, you can be Hindu, it doesn't matter. Once there was a Muslim man, and all night he's chanting, Allah, 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 Allah. All night he's chanting. All throughout the night, till the morning. And his neighbor comes over the next morning, and his neighbor says to him, what were you doing all night? I kept hearing you saying, Allah, Allah, Allah. Did Allah come to you? He said, no, Allah did not come to me. He said, well, why are you doing that? And he said, I don't know. He had doubt. So then this saintly person walked by and he heard the conversation. And he said to the man, you misunderstood. Allah came to you. How? Yeah, I didn't see him. Doesn't mean you have to see God, that he comes to you. But he gave you in your heart the desire to be with him. And that, in essence, can only happen as if he touches you, touches your heart. So he came with you, came to you in the form of desire to be with him. Longing. In Sanskrit, it's called laulyam. And Rupa Goswami says, there's no way you can advance to become a lover of God unless you have laulyam. You develop a longing, a intense desire to be with God. When you have an intense desire to be with God, then you'll do anything. You'll make any sacrifice. I remember when I was in high school, I was a sophomore in high school, so that'll make me around 15 or 16 before I could drive. And I had a girlfriend. You know, nothing serious. It's a girlfriend. So she said, come over to my house. And I said, okay. And the day that I was supposed to go over, it snowed like Siberia. It snowed and snowed and snowed. So then I was thinking, okay, I got to go there. And I walked in the snow. I hitchhiked in the snow because I was going to a school in a different town that was miles away. And she lived in that town and I lived in another town. And I did all this incredible, crazy sacrifice to get there for a relationship, to be with my girlfriend. Now, in retrospect, that was kind of crazy. It was freezing cold. It was snow. So many things. But it was sacrifice. Bilva Mangala Thakur, a great saintly personality, he also had a friend. And her name was Chintamani. And Bilva Mangala Thakur really wanted to be with Chintamani. So he said, Chintamani, I will come to you tonight. In the meantime, it stormed. It was raining and windy, and the river was flooding. He had to cross a river. And it was dangerous because when it rains in India, it really rains. And the rivers get really, really rough. So Chintamani lived on the other side of the river. He comes to the river. What am I going to do? I have to see Chintamani. So he goes into the river. The water's pushing him. And he grabs onto something. He thinks it's a log. And he's kicking and kicking. And then when he gets to the other side of the shore, he looks at the log and it's actually a dead body. Because in India, sometimes you'll see that. When a person dies, they'll throw him in the Ganges. They'll throw him in the sacred river. So he goes to the door of Chintamani and he knocks on the door. Chintamani, Chintamani, I'm here. And she opens the door and she looks at him. He's soaking wet. She looks at him. She says, if you had that kind of desire to see the Lord, then you would not suffer in this world. You would experience a love so great that no other love can compete. And at that moment, Bilva Mangala Thakur was touched by the Spirit of God, because God spoke to her through a messenger. And that's another lesson to learn. Always listen. You don't know who is going to be a messenger in your life to give you the message that you need to hear at that particular moment in time to direct your course. Sometimes we kind of go off our course and then somebody says something to you. It may not even be a devotee. It may be somebody who will say something that has a pearl of wisdom, and they say something to you and, oh yeah, that is so right. I'm so going off the path. So Chintamani, because she had a pure heart, that God sent a message to Bilva Mangala Thakur. And Bilva Mangala Thakur heard that. Yes, if I was to do this austerity as an offering to God, then I would become free from the suffering condition of life in this material world. At that point, Bilva Mangala Thakur gave up everything. And he became a devotee, and he dedicated his life to sacrifice for the pleasure of the Lord. And to this day, the songs and poetry of Bilva Mangala Thakur is read and relished by so many devotees, because the level of his realization was so great. It was so great that he became blind, and he became a beggar. And so he was a blind beggar. And one day he was sitting under a tree and no one was giving him anything. So he had faith. He thought, well, today I don't eat. Then all of a sudden, he hears this walking. What are you doing, old man? Young voice speaks. He said, today I was begging, but alas, no one gave me anything. So today I fast. And the young boy said, oh, no. No. No one fasts in my village. And he gave Bilva Mangala Thakur the most celestial milk. When Bilva Mangala Thakur tasted that milk, all of his hunger, all of his thirst went away. So when Bilva Mangala Thakur, went to say thank you to the boy just laughed and ran away. And Bilva Mangala Thakur realized who that boy was. It was his Krishna. So that was the result. There's Bilva Mangala Thakur performing austerities to see Chintamani. Chintamani spoke a message from God that sparked him giving up all sinful activities and dedicating his life to God, all of his activities, yet karoshi, yet ashnasi, yet jehosi, tadasya, all that he did, all that he offered, all that he gave away, all austerities that he performed, and he became a great, pure devotee of the Lord, and chanted, and chanted, and chanted. So it's that simple. In this day and age of Kali Yuga, if we want to establish a loving relationship with God, and what's the perks of that? Perks of no more suffering. That means reward. What's the side reward? You don't suffer. And your heart becomes filled with the fruits of good quality, like kindness, compassion, friendliness. These are the fruits of being touched by the Spirit of God. They naturally manifest in the core of your heart. And then, Chetodarpanam Marjanam, Bhava Mahadavagni Nirvapa. Your heart becomes cleansed from any impediment. You know what impediment means? Anything that's stopping you from becoming, giving, sacrificing to please God. Lust, anger, greed, pride, envy. All of these qualities which are actually obstacles. And you know what's the biggest one of those are? Pride. Take away all the others and maintain pride, then pride will fill the space where all the others were. So, Chetodarpanam Marjanam Bhava Mahadavagni Nirvapa. This ocean of mercy, this rainfall. You know, rain is so kind and so merciful that it will rain anywhere and everywhere, right? When it rains on the beach, it rains on your garden, it rains on your lawn. Rain goes everywhere because rain is merciful. So you develop a clean heart, and clean heart means you can see yourself, who you really are. When a mirror, you know, when you go to the bathroom and you you take a hot shower, and then you look in the mirror, oh no, there's all fog there. You can't see yourself, right? But if you start wiping the mirror clean, oh, there I am. Hey, who is that old man in the mirror? Oh, it's me. So when you clean the heart, you begin to see yourself as you are. Prabhupada used the example. You come into a room, it looks clean. Then you take the broom and you start cleaning, and all of a sudden you see all the dirt. Whoops. There's dirt, there's dust in the corner. There's dust under the bureau. There's dust, oh my God, under the bed. But initially when you walk in, it doesn't look so bad. So when we start cleaning our heart, we may not think, oh, you know, we're not so bad. And then all of a sudden, the end result of cleaning, making an effort to clean your heart, you see all the things that are obstructing you, that are stopping you from making advancement in your spiritual life. Knowledge comes from the chanting. Faith, determination, all of these things are the fruits, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, of chanting. Jagnai Sankirtana Prayeri Janti Smedasa. So, sacrifice, just Prabhupada used an old English word, dovetail. I never knew that word before. I was an English major. That was my major in the university. And I never heard that word before, but when I read Prabhupada's book, Prabhupada said, dovetail your desires. That means redirect. You don't have to stop doing anything that you're doing. Nothing. Krishna won't ask you to stop being a mother, stop being a father, stop being a friend, stop being a citizen. No, it's just reconfiguring your perspective and seeing everything in relationship to pleasing God, to pleasing Krishna. So, thank you very much. I'm very grateful for being here, being in your association. If anyone would like to ask any question or share any realization they have, I would be happy to entertain any and all of those. Anyone? No? Are you all convinced or are you all bored? Yes. Laksmi Priya.
It's not going to concern the topic that we discussed just a little bit. So basically, I always had like this confusion about knowing the fact that soul lives in every living being, or actually in every atom molecule, like every tiny minute particle. And that always like kind of like blew my mind away. So it means that inside my body I have because I know I have millions and trillions of cells. Does that mean that I have like trillions souls residing in me? And how do I know which soul is mine? It's like, is that like a collective soul that all of us have, that we, the fact that we have so many cells and each cell has a soul inside? What's the interaction between all these souls, and are they like dormant because they're in the lower forms of life? How do we interact? How's my soul as who I am interacts with those? You know what I mean? Like, doesn't that make any sense? Like,
Yes,
I could never get
I've heard the question.
a clear answer to.
Yeah, there's two souls. Every form where there is the jiva, the little particle, which is providing the predominating consciousness. If you have parasites or other living entities in your body, cells, anything that has life and is independent has that because the presence of the soul. But in the body, there's a predominating consciousness, and everything else is subservient to that predominating consciousness. But also within the body is super soul, Paramatma. Sarvasya chaham sarvasya chaham gridi sanidishto smatak smritya jnanam aponicha. In all living, Krishna says, in all living beings, I am present next to you. And I am the source of knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So I think you misunderstood. There's not a soul in every atom, but the super soul is present in every atom. Not that the soul is present where there's life. Wherever you see life, the life can only be due to the presence of the soul. Because Prakriti and Purush. There's two predominating energies in this world. Prakriti means earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, ego. Krishna says that in the 7th chapter, beginning of the 7th chapter. But Prakriti, in and of itself, the material energy is not able to be conscious. It is unconscious matter. The only time that Prakriti can become conscious is when there's presence of the soul. Just like you had twins, right? That's because two souls entered two separate ovum. And the ovum, before the presence of the semen, was just a cluster of cells. But as soon as there is unification, then what happens to that cluster of cells? Immediately, and they have a film of this, immediately the cluster of cells begins to morph, begins to change, and eventually forms in a tiny thumb-sized embryo, and then grows and grows and grows. 9-10 months later, there's a child. So there's not a soul in every atom, there's a super soul that's in every atom. That's why God is present when they say God is present everywhere. Yes.
But she's asking about the soul and individual cells.
Right.
And the cells are alive.
Yes, we do. We do. We do have millions of present, but the way it's structured is the predominating consciousness is you.
Mhm.
That is you. And everything else is subject to that predominating consciousness. That's why you don't have a million voices going on. Hey, I want this. No, I want that. I want to reside in the liver. No, I want to reside in the kidney. You don't have that kind of conversation going on. Huh? Yeah, you have, you want to follow
I
up?
say predominating conscious. The conscious and the soul is not the same though. I mean, because the conscious takes into account the experience of life, which is the body.
Yeah, they're not the same because they don't have the facility to be the same.
So it's just influence.
Yeah. The facility that you have, meaning the species of life or whatever, is covered depending on how much consciousness is there, you know, that has perception and reasoning power. That's why it's considered, the human being is considered the topmost species because it has the ability to reason. Other species don't have that, or, you know, in lesser and lesser and lesser degrees. So when you have amoeba and paramecium and other kinds of cells, etc., they're very, very covered over. And only the basics, the fundamental basics of existence, like being able to nourish itself one way or the other according to the species that it has. Like a tiger nourishes itself by eating meat, you know, preying on other animals, eating meat. And its consciousness, according to that body type, the facility that it's in, can only realize so much. That's why Prabhupada would often say, you never see a dog and a cat coming to a Bhagavad Gita lecture. Only human beings come. Unless you have that rare soul. I saw in Alachua, when I lived there for 6 years, every morning for Bhagavatam class, the cat, the temple cat, would come and he would sit in a doorway while class was going on. So that's a very special cat. And in Chaitanya Leela, you had the Shivananda Sain's dog. When Shivananda Sain was going to Jagannath Puri to see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he had all of the residents from Navadvip with him, there was a dog along the way, and Shivananda said, feed the dog. Because in India, they see dogs as dogs, not like, oh, my little pet, my little baby. They don't see dogs like that. Dogs walk the street. They're the cleanup crew for carcasses. They're they take everything and eat it, and eat anything. Dogs are dogs. So in India, you know, people don't normally see dogs like in the West. But Shivananda Sain was such a great devotee that he had made sure that dog was fed every day. One night the dog didn't show up to eat. Shivananda said, where is this dog? And he got very much an anxiety. How's the dog gonna live? And he sent his men out looking for the dog. They couldn't find the dog. When they came to Puri, Jagannath Puri, and they went to take darshan of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the dog was sitting next to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he was feeding the dog coconut pulp. And by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's blessing, that dog went back to Godhead. And also, Lal Babu was a resident saint of Navadvip. And he saw all living beings equally. The dog eater, the Brahmin, the lower caste. He made notice he saw everybody equal. He had equal vision. So one time he had a dog, and the dog would chant during kirtan. Whenever he did kirtan, and the dog was the dog was chanting all the time. And the dog died. And he felt so bad. So he told all the local Brahmins, I'm going to have a celebration, because when a great personality dies, you have a mahotsav, you have a celebration. So he said, I'm inviting all you Brahmins, you come celebrate the death of this great personality. And the Brahmins looked at him. He's a dog. Yeah, but he always did kirtan with me. He's not an ordinary dog. He's a dog. You can't have this ceremony, this celebration for a dog. And he said, oh no, I'm going to have this. You were invited to come. And I've invited all the dogs in the neighborhood. So the Brahmin said, okay, when all the dogs in the neighborhood come to take part in this celebration, then we'll come. So Babu said, okay. And he prepared this giant feast. And on the day of the feast, he had all the plates. You know, in India, they use banana leaf plates. He put banana leaf plates all on it. And all the Brahmins are off in the distance and they're laughing. He's really gone crazy. He thinks the dogs are going to come and take prasadam. So after they're finished setting up, all the dogs came. And one dog sat behind one plate. And all the dogs were there. And they were sitting and they were waiting for the prasadam to be distributed. And the Brahmins were like, so they said, because they're Brahmins, they have to keep their word. They said, if the dogs come, we'll come. Then all the Brahmins came, and the dogs and the Brahmins were all served at the feast. So consciousness normally provides a certain degree, it's a facility for a certain level of seeing the world. So the very lowest consciousness are the bacteria and the cells and, you know, the one-celled, that's the least amount of facility to experience consciousness. So the predominating consciousness in a body is that consciousness which is the most elevated. And its consciousness is so powerful, it's spread throughout the entire body. How is it spread through? The soul resides within the heart area, and through blood, consciousness is spread throughout the entire body. No other cell in the body has that powerful of a consciousness to do that. Did you ever sit cross-legged? My son does this all the time. And then your leg is numb. You can't feel. It's because the blood flow was cut off and consciousness. So that's why you predominate. You meaning that soul that is Lakshmi Priya, identifies as Lakshmi Priya, identifies in that female body, identifies with your age, etc. Because it's a predominating consciousness. It's given karmically the facility to have the potential to go back to Godhead.
So what happens with those souls that reside in those cells and basically I heard there's a book written it's called The Saints of ISKCON. There was one saint there was one certain person there and he was talking about like every time he would get sick he would take the Mahaprasadam because he knew that all the cells and all the bacteria and viruses in his body will benefit from it and will receive liberation. They'll go back to Godhead. And I read this and I was like, oh my gosh, it's just mind blowing because like we sit here and we think, you know, we need to do this, we need to do that. There's so much that we need to do in order to be qualified for certain things. And here there's a little tiny little bacteria or cell that lives inside my body that just by me consuming the Mahaprasadam, that cell gets the benefit and then the soul goes back to Godhead. So is that like, I don't know, is that how it works?
That's what I've heard. Sanatana Goswami, because he was traveling to see Lord Chaitanya from a distant place, and he got diseased, and so much disease, he had so many sores on his body that there were worms, you know, kind of worm in the sore. So if he would bend over and they would fall out, he'd pick them up and put them back onto the sore, so that that particular soul will not be deprived from the prasad, from the hearing of the holy name. We cannot imagine how powerful a force is chanting God's names. We say, yes, you know, it's powerful, but we have no idea how powerful it is. We have no idea.
Yeah, but when you pronounce it, I mean, like when you sing the Maha mantra, right?
Mhm.
And sometimes you're not conscious. Sometimes you're somewhere, but you come back to it. So how powerful it is?
It's powerful
It
enough that
still doesn't matter.
you come back. It's powerful enough. Our minds, when not controlled, that it goes everywhere all the time. But when if it comes back, that means there's some attraction there, right? One time, an Indian man came to Srila Prabhupada and he said, Srila Prabhupada, I see your disciples during Bhagavatam class, they're falling asleep. So Prabhupada said, oh, they're falling asleep all the time? He said, no, not all the time. 90% of the time. So Prabhupada said, oh, they're awake 10% of the time? Yeah, okay, they're awake 10% of the time. He says, so that's 10% more advancement that you will make. That's how potent. Just being 10% conscious. But if we're serious practitioners, the mind wanders, we draw it back, we bring it back. Yes, it's to be understood when we start that the mind is going to. Arjuna told Krishna, the mind is restless like the wind, blowing everywhere. But we have to just draw it back. That's why initially when I said laulium, that this strong desire has to be there, because the strong desire can counteract the whimsicality of the mind, the tendency of the mind to be here and there and everywhere. Strong desire will say, oh, my mind is not present, I have to bring it back. But even from a material standpoint, mindfulness is a very powerful force. That person who's able to concentrate on their work or on their studies, those people usually excel. So even the concept of mindfulness in anything you do is an important principle. We should always, a principle of Ayurveda is conscious eating, right? In Ayurveda it says, you should be conscious. Don't look at the phone. Why? Now you're not conscious of what you're doing. Don't look at the phone. Don't have excessive amount of conversation. Don't read a book. Don't be distracted. Be conscious. Be grateful. And that is such a powerful energy that helps you to digest better, etc. That's materially. What to speak of spiritually, that we can be conscious of our chanting. And the more we make the endeavor, the more Krishna reciprocates. We can't do it by ourselves. Krishna reciprocates by you making the effort. Okay. Thank you so much for your questions, your observations. I appreciate it greatly. Hare Krishna.
Yeah.